We'll have, before we have Q&A, we'll have our third speaker, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, former Chief of Staff of Colin Powell, now teaching at the College of William and Mary, and well, we won't mention the other schools, College of William and Mary for now. Thank you very much, Colonel Wilkerson.
Well, with my foot the way it is, I guarantee you I won't take too long. I want to expand on Robin's remarks a bit. I'd love to say thanks to Rodwan and Tamara for having me here at the CSID. And let me speak to you as if I were wearing only my military hat and back at my job as strategic assistant, special assistant, or strategy, whatever you want to call it, to the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. And give you my rather dismal strategic appraisal of the Arab Spring after 2 years by giving you what I would give to the chairman, which is my appraisal, strategically speaking, of the region. The first thing I would start with is the absolutely precarious position of our principal, though non-signatory treaty ally in the region, Israel. Not since 1948 has Israel been in such a precarious position. Just survey the scene. The two bastions of her stability in terms of peace agreements, Jordan and Egypt, are anything but. Jordan's king even recently said he wasn't sure he wanted to be king anymore. I don't blame him. Once he's saddled with millions of Iraqi refugees, now millions of Syrian refugees, and he's already got Palestinians to boot. Take a look at Iraq, and Iraq is anything but what the neoconservatives in my administration wanted it to be. Yesterday, one of the former Iraqis with whom I dealt extensively when I was Chief of Staff said to me, it's democracy and freedom. That's the new expression in Syria. Democracy and freedom. That is, dumb is free and people are crazy. Iraq is falling apart. Iraq will be 3 countries, he said, within, echoing Robin's remarks, within 5 years. Kurdistan already exists in the north with a secret agreement with Ankara to be Kurdistan. In the center, the Sunnis are going to take back over, and in the south, Basra and Najaf and so forth, there will be some Shia with Iranian help. Iran, we'll get to that in a moment because that is the focal point of U.S. security policy in the region right now, whether you know it or not. Moving on around to Syria, brutal civil war spilling now over into Lebanon, where Hassan Nasrallah is probably more prominent than any Lebanese government, which seems to go out a revolving door periodically. And Israel is in the middle of that. I think the recent telephone call to Erdogan in Turkey was an indication of President Obama having told Prime Minister Netanyahu, you were a strategic idiot. Pick up the phone, call Ankara, and apologize. You were so isolated. You were so alone. We are your only friend. Call Turkey. Get Turkey back, at least, into the neutral fold, if not the positive fold. So that's the first thing I would tell the chairman about our strategic position in this region of the world. I would also tell him that the nature of war has passed Israel by. Look at the July 2006 incursion into Lebanon, and you understand. The IDF, in military terms, got its ass handed to it. Operation Cast Lead in Gaza was an attempt to reestablish the IDF by brutal tactics as he who must be obeyed in the region, but it didn't work very well. Israel is in deep trouble. That means the United States is in deep trouble. Because unlike what Washington advised when he left the presidency, we've allowed Israel to dictate more or less our security policy to us. And it does not include what the previous speaker talked about, the most important ingredient of that policy in a meaningful way, and that is effecting a resolution of the now almost half-century-old Palestinian-Israeli problem. What I see is an increasingly apartheid state in Israel continuing to occupy territory that it shouldn't be occupying and becoming untenable as either a Jewish or a democratic or a Jewish democratic state or a state period, because the numbers just don't work. So the first thing, Mr. Chairman, you're looking at is a situation where all your hard assets are in Oman, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere, Qatar, not in Israel, but your heart's in Israel, and Israel is in real deep trouble. Let's survey the rest of the region and talk about it for just a second. What is your policy with regard to the real hegemon in the region? A hegemon whom you recognized for 26 years, so long as the leader of that hegemon was your man, the Shah. Well, even you, Mr. President, who wanted us out of Iraq and are trying to get us out of Afghanistan, even you have painted yourself into a corner with regard to Iran, because you said diplomacy is the option you're pursuing, and diplomacy for you right now, because of your Congress, but also because of your mistakes, is sanctions. Plain and simple, period. That's the only policy you had, is sanctions. Unless you're willing to take a great political risk and surrender some of those sanctions, the mullahs in Tehran are not going to listen to you, nor are the civilians, nor is anyone. And so you either have one of two choices: you back down or you attack. The recent speech by President Obama, I listened to word for word. I played it back again. It was a cri de coeur. Here's a president saying, I don't want to be doing these things because rationally and emotionally I know they're wrong. Guantanamo, is that who we are? Is that who we are? He asked plaintively. And yet he's doing it. And what is he doing rather than reacting to the Arab Spring the way we reacted, and I got this question repeatedly today, to the fall of the Berlin Wall, where we reached in to help Poles and Czechs and Slovaks and others throw off the Iron Curtain and get into the modern world. Why aren't we doing that sort of thing? Because we're scared to death. And because this president, when he came in, didn't close Guantanamo, which he could have done easily because he's scared to death, because his advisors scared him to death. So what is our policy today? Our policy is principally what it was in the Cold War. Only we're not fighting communists in these countries, we're fighting terrorists. And we will supply and support anyone who does that in our name. Dictator, Thomas Jefferson, doesn't matter who it is, as long as he will fight terrorists in the region, we will supply and support. And there's not a lot left after that. And by the way, there aren't too many Jeffersonian Democrats wandering around the region. What kind of advice do you think the Saudi royal family is giving the President of the United States? And what kind of advice do you think, for that matter, the Israeli infrastructure, intelligence, military, political, and so forth, is giving the United States? Better watch out what you wish for. I remember a speech that Dr. Rice gave, which was the only speech that she gave in her entire time as National Security Advisor, that I clapped at. It was the one where she changed our policy from supporting dictators to supporting Democrats. The speech just went down the road. No one really paid much attention to it, particularly when it came to putting money and assets and soft power behind those remarks. Because the dictators are still important. Where is the largest military installation? The largest fleet headquarters in the U.S. Navy? In Bahrain. Where's the largest airfield, I think now, in the world for high-performance aircraft? In Qatar. Who helped us get into Afghanistan when we needed to most quickly and most effectively? Oman. So it is not the place where we find it comfortable to support Democrats. And it is particularly not the place we find it comfortable to support Democrats when you look around and see everyone as Al-Qaeda or an Al-Qaeda lookalike. Take Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. There was zero Al-Qaeda in Iraq until we invaded. I don't think Osama bin Laden would have allied himself with Abu Musab al-Zarqawi had it been the last person on earth with whom he should do it with. But he did because this bloodthirsty man was going to kill Americans in Iraq. And so all of a sudden, Al-Qaeda in Iraq was born. That's how we produce these Al-Qaedas all over the world, is by our presence and our policy. And they have become the focus. And this is why the president issued this very otherwise befuddling speech where he lamented what he had to do to keep Americans safe. At the same time, he decried what he was doing. He even called on Madison. He even said that Madison eloquently explained how a nation constantly at war was a nation risking its own democracy and extremely ill-equipped to help others build theirs. And then the last issue that strikes one, Mr. Chairman, as I'm telling you about all this, is the United States economic situation. Sequestration for the Pentagon, for example, has brought this home in a way that nothing else could. And what is this? This is the stupidity and dysfunctionality of the legislative branch of our government. This is the inability of the greatest nation on earth to do anything about its fiscal situation other than punt. And it's coming home to the Pentagon in such glaring terms that the Pentagon is now desperately, essentially killing its men and women, because they're the most expensive element of its apparatus. And so at West Point, at the recent graduation where Secretary of Defense Hagel spoke, they had just cut 22 cadets who otherwise wouldn't have been cut, because the word is out, people have to go. People have to go. That's how desperate the Pentagon is right now to deal with sequestration. And it's going to become worse as the Congress becomes worse in making wise decisions about how to deal with the economic situation we find confronting us right now. So, let me wrap up quickly because I don't have any more time. Mr. Chairman, you do not want to be doing anything else. You want to get out of Afghanistan, you want to finish Iraq, we haven't. You want to get out of the region. You don't want to do anything with hard power in the region. Oh, you do not want a war with Iran. And oh, by the way, you need to transfer some of your money over to the State Department so that soft power can be used in ways that might be effective over there in the places where it might be effective, such as Tunisia. I mean, that's a real nutshell briefing. But you know, I think, a little bit more about why the United States is so tentative and so reluctant to do what it should be doing at this time. It is too intently focused on its own dilemmas, its own problematic situation, both domestically and internationally, and frankly, on its ability to sustain itself against a group of nations out there who've smelled all this and are at work, either consciously or unconsciously, to continue the demise of this great democracy. And that ranges the gamut from Putin in Moscow to Beijing to, in fact, other places that sent blood. It's a tough world, Mr. Chairman, but the military instrument is not that which should be used any further in Western Asia or North Africa. We need to wind down, as the President said, this incredibly debilitating so-called global war on terror. Really wind it down, not just rhetorically. We need to get our own domestic house in order, and we need to help those who are trying to do the same in North Africa and Western Asia as much as we possibly can with soft power. That's going to be a real hard pill to say.